This is the Thoughtful Travel Podcast. I'm your host, Amanda Kendall of the notaballerina.com travel blog. Every episode I'll share travel tales from several fellow travel lovers, and together we hope to entertain and inspire you, remind you of some of your own great travel experiences, and encourage you to hit the road again soon. Hello and welcome to episode 114 of the Thoughtful Travel Podcast. It's a very special episode today because it's about my recent trip to Cambodia. And I'd never been to Cambodia before, and it really, really stole my heart. It's a fabulous destination with amazing people and such interesting as well as devastating history to share and gorgeous culture. So if you haven't been to Cambodia, get yourself there. I actually chatted with three of my fellow travellers from our Cambodia trip. We went there with Hands On Journeys, who are the sponsor of this episode too. So I know you've heard me talk about Hands On Journeys before. And in fact, my second guest today, Aimee, heard about me talk about Hands On Journeys trips on this podcast and therefore looked them up and booked the trip to Cambodia. So it was pretty exciting to have a Thoughtful Travel Podcast listener on the trip with me. And she was awesome, as you would expect of Thoughtful Travel Podcast listeners. So that was really cool. So yeah, do head over to handsonjourneys.com and see what else they've got coming up. There's a trip to Mexico in the works for, I think it's April next year. And India, Fiji on the cards for next year as well. And honestly, the best way to travel. I'm a little bit biased because, well, no, I'm not. I just love them. Anyway, let me get on because I've actually got a little bit longer than usual episode today because I chatted with my three fellow travellers and they all talked for so long about their Cambodian experiences, and I've tried to kind of cut it back to some just real essence of it, but there's so much good stuff because it was an incredible trip. Now, you may remember back in episode 104, I did a similar episode about my trip to Fiji with Hands On Journeys, but I have the same problem in that I asked them for their kind of highlight of the trip, and everybody kind of picked pretty much the same highlights, which were the project days. So Hands On Journeys works under the idea of empowerment tourism. So it's kind of not just volunteer tourism. It's another step kind of beyond that, where they aim to empower communities who need some help to be able to help themselves, in terms of, for example, helping them develop a sustainable business and things like that. You'll hear more about it during this episode. So my three guests all kind of talked about similar parts of the trip, although during our Cambodian time, we were lucky enough to visit villages in two different parts of Cambodia, one near Siem Reap and one near Phnom Penh, and really get to see how Hands On Journeys have been helping them and to really, just to do some awesome stuff. But I will let my guests tell you. I could talk for the whole episode just myself, but you'd get bored of me talking. So let me tell you about my first guest. Meagan Hurst is from California and she runs a small business called Malas with a Mission, which I'll give you some links to at the end. And I asked her about her highlights from our time in Cambodia.
The thing that really stuck out to me was the first village visit in Siem Reap. I thought that just the way that we were able to share the culture with the cooking class was so beautiful, and them really allowing us to like get our hands dirty literally and get in there with cooking with them, and just kind of really seeing how they do it. Like they would be like, no, do it this way, obviously without much words, just by showing. It was just like such a great way to bond with the people. And yeah, I was just so impressed and so like kind of emotional that whole day, like just from them preparing all the dancing for us. It made me feel like royalty. Like they've specially done this for us. And it was such a beautiful show of their culture. And like so specific to Cambodian culture, which I thought was awesome. All the dancing was so beautiful. And then I think the cherry on top was that when we got to meet Ye, the elder of the village, she was the one who was the inspiration for all these girls to learn to dance. And so I like that was just like the cherry on top for me. And I was like, this is insane. Like, and the fact that she survived through the Khmer Rouge and she is alive to tell her story still, and that she's, getting the chance to share her story is so incredible, because, I mean, it's a rare thing that there are those elderly people in Cambodia that survived, but then the people who actually are able to tell their story too. So it's, and as these people get older, we're not going to have them any longer too. So I think it's just so important to, I grew up in the States learning a lot about the Holocaust and about World War II, and not as much about Cambodia. I mean, a little bit about what happened there, but not as much. And so I kind of, the whole time, like listening to her story, it kind of reminded me of like all the Holocaust survivor stories that you would hear. And so just, when I was in high school, there was a broadcast journalism program, and they traveled to Germany, and they did this whole documentary on the Holocaust and interviewing survivors. And it was called, the title of the documentary was "We Must Remember." And so it kind of made me think of Ye's story. Like, we must remember this. It can't just be something that, slides into history or, fades away. So I think hearing her story, and then that whole day in the village, and then drawing our pictures was like such a little sweet surprise. Again, just made us like kind of one of those things where you're like, I feel like I'm taking so much, like you're giving so much to us. What can I leave you with? And I think that in the end, it's just like a beautiful exchange, like mutual exchange of giving. And I think that's the perfect balance. And then, with the Khmer Rouge, I think my other highlight was the killing fields. And I think that even though it was a really difficult place to visit, I think that, again, it's something that's so important. And it was just really like real and raw. And it was a place that there was a lot of respect, which I think was really important. Seeing like all the skulls that were stacked up at the end at the memorial, and just walking around, and like the place being so quiet, and so many people being there to learn about what happened, even though it's not a fun touristy thing to do. But it kind of reminded me of being in Europe too, because I guess there's a lot of like museums, like the Holocaust museums and stuff, like people go and in the memorials, but it's like, it's paying respects. It's not like your fun tourist activity. And so I think just that day has really stuck with me, and what I learned, and just like how I felt that day has stuck with me. And seeing the photographs in the museum also later that day, the Genocide Museum, was like, I think really over the top for me, because again, relating it back to kind of my experience with learning about the World War II and the Holocaust, you see those pictures and they're much, much older. And so the photographs are like blurry or grainy or like not as clear. And like the photographs from the Khmer Rouge were like so much more recent, and they were like crystal clear, like crisp pictures of these people. And like just the fear and the emotion in their eyes was like so powerful, because that's what I look for. And that's what I do, is I capture that emotion in that moment. And like, oh gosh, it kind of gives me chills even just thinking about it. So
yeah, I agree. I think the recency of it is horrifying. Like, that was actually still happening when I was a baby and a little kid. It's in my actual lifetime, and that's really hard to imagine. Like, because I agree, we learned a lot about the Holocaust in school as well, and it seemed, historical, whereas, what happened in Cambodia seems it's really not that long ago, and that's really, chilling and emotional and hard.
Yeah, chilling is a good word to use.
And then to have had our amazing time there, and, to meet so many wonderful, welcoming, beautiful Cambodians, it sort of doesn't even stack up. It's such a, it's a contrasting experience. Yeah,
I think overall Cambodia was it was kind of almost not what I expected. I think I've heard the backpackers perspective and the party perspective, and I know that there's a lot of issues with like prostitution and drugs and things like that, and kind of like the darker side. And a lot of people describe Cambodia as like the Wild West of Southeast Asia. Like it's just more lawless and crazy. And I mean, I didn't really get that feeling at all. And I think that's just because we dug into the real culture and we didn't just scrape the surface. We like actually cared to get to know people, and in the country and the history. We weren't just there to be a partier and take and not leave anything good behind.
I have to agree with Meagan that our trip to the village near Siem Reap was really a really big highlight for me as well. Getting to meet Ye, the kind of the mother elder of the village, who had horrifying experiences thanks to the Khmer Rouge. She lost 10 of her 15 siblings to the Khmer Rouge. Was a really powerful thing to be able to hear her story. And when she told it to us, she actually had only just told it for the first time during that week, and her daughters until then hadn't heard her speak about it. So I thought that was a really important thing for them to be able to know all about that history as well. So anyway, I could talk for hours about that too. It was an amazing experience. Meagan and I, after this part of our chat, we actually talked also about something that's really dear to her heart and I'd like to mention, which is animal welfare. And when we were in Phnom Penh, my son and I were on the way to the Russian markets for some shopping, and Meagan said, I'll come with you because you can drop me on the way to the Phnom Penh Animal Welfare Society. So PAWS, but with two P's, because she always likes to check these places out, and she was really impressed by them. So I'm going to leave a link in the show notes to PAWS as well, in case you are heading to Phnom Penh and want to do something in the way of helping animals. So my next guest is Aimee Jackson from London, and as I mentioned in the intro, she is a long-term Thoughtful Travel podcast listener who came along on the trip. So it was so exciting. I still remember finding out that she was coming. It was pretty cool. Now we chatted literally for hours, over 2 hours, I think, and so I've cut down just a small part of her description of her highlight of our Cambodian trip, which was our other project day in Cambodia, going to a village near Phnom Penh.
It's so hard to pick a favourite, but if forced, I will. The one that I think had the most impact, the most memorable day, was the day that we went to the homestay outside Phnom Penh. Mm-hmm. Which actually I believe is Mr. 8's highlight as well.
You're quite right.
So he and I share quite a similar way of thinking, I think, sometimes. Because we've definitely agreed on quite a few things. But yeah, the homestay in Phnom Penh was definitely an incredible day. I mean, partly I think because beforehand it was the day that I had the most I was most unsure about. Mm-hmm. That, it's quite outside my comfort zone. I haven't done anything like that before, and I just didn't really know what to expect. But the more I got to find out, the more information that we got, the more comfortable I was in the country in the days before. That subsided, and then the day we arrived, driving into this village, and all the kids are smiling at you and waving, and we get out the bus and get to meet the families, and immediately we were confronted with kind of two buildings side by side, one which was quite kind of wooden and had a hole in the roof and was, had seen better days, and the one next door was a kind of a modern building on proper foundations with decent windows, and it looked, wouldn't look out of place really anywhere in the world. And that's when Simla said, oh yeah, she was, hugging and saying hello to all the families. This is literally whilst we're still getting off the bus. And she said, oh yeah, this is, it's a family that we've been supporting for 3 or 4 years. And since we've started helping them, they've then had the funds to be able to build this whole new house. And the other house was the one they had been living in. And I thought I was like, okay, wow. It's amazing the amount of changes that you can make to people's lives, and how much it really can have a real positive effect. and they were clearly so delighted to see her, and Cham as well. That was quite awesome. And I thought, okay, this is going to be a good day. I thought this is going to be awesome. And then, so I think we had a bit of a walk around, met our families that we were staying with, and then walked off towards the family that we had paid for the toilet block to be built for, to do the painting, which was good fun, but hot. Pictures do not show how hot and humid it was. And particularly for Tom and Sim and I, we were working inside, and it was just boiling, and the paint fumes.
I was glad I was outside. I didn't plan it that way, but in retrospect, I was glad to be outside.
Yeah, I think we'd finished doing one coat inside, and I was like, I need to get some fresh air. And like the paint fumes were particularly quite a little bit overwhelming. So yeah, outside, and then my kind of OCD kind of touching up corners kind of took over a little bit. And then we came on to the part which I think is probably the most impactful moment of the entire trip for me, specifically, which was when we went to deliver the water filters to some of the families in the village. So the water filters are, I think they were not very expensive, something like $30 or $40 each, something about that amount. And they're sort of big plastic drums which sits inside. So inside that sits a ceramic kind of pot, and so you put the dirty water in the top, and then through the ceramic, the porous material that filters the water to create the fresh drinking water. And it's such a simple design. It's got a little tap at the bottom. It's so simple and straightforward. It's supposed to last like 8 to 10 years. Incredible. I couldn't believe how inexpensive they were. And so we carried them along. Probably had to walk for about a mile or so with these, sharing the task of carrying the water filters before we reached the sort of edge of the village and the families that we'd be delivering them to. So I went into the first house with Cham and with 2 others, and I've forgotten who they were now. And we kind of stood, said hello, but kind of stood out the way whilst Cham described to the family how to use the water filters, how to, what each of the parts were, and you had to sort of flush it through with clean water for 7 days before you could use it. And that if at the end of that time, if there was like debris in the bottom of the place where the clean water should be, then it's broken, and they should take it back to the school, and the school will replace it. So all this kind of information. I was like, oh, I'm quite interested in this. Quite like knowing how things work. So we delivered that water filter and said goodbye to the family, and then we went down the road to the next house. We go in, and Cham says, "Come on, Aimee," and this is your turn now. And I was like, "Oh, I was with you in the first house." And he was like, "No, you're going to describe to this family, how to use it." Wow. And I was like, "Oh, okay then." I wasn't prepared to be. It wasn't like I was taking notes, but I did pay attention, so because I am genuinely quite interested in that sort of thing. Went into this house, introduced to the father of the family, and there was him and his wife, and I think there was like the wife's sister, and then maybe their 3 children lived in a very small home that was, compared to the houses in which we were staying as the homestays, these were clearly much more thrown together. A lot less robust, a lot smaller.
More like a shelter than a home, in a sense.
Yeah, you could really notice the difference in quality and between them, and the living standards were clearly not as good as the families that we were staying with. And so I explained to this dad, and obviously Cham translated for me, each of the steps and what all the parts did, and then we said thank you, and then we left, and I had to really walk off and take a minute for myself at that point. It was it makes my whole body kind of shiver just thinking about it, that they didn't have enough money to be able to afford to buy such a straightforward basic piece of equipment that could really change the quality of their lives. And I don't know about that family in particular, but from what I gather from conversations that we had that day, is that a lot of the families in that village, particularly on that kind of outskirts area that we were at, had at least one child die before the age of 5 from waterborne diseases. And I just found that so shocking. And I took one photograph of the pond next to their house, which was full of rubbish, full of plastic bottles and boxes and just general rubbish. And that was where they had got their water from previously. It was this kind of green pond. And I was just, found that quite overwhelming to think, and they were lovely people, and they were smiling and happy. And it was such a marked difference from my everyday life that I found that moment that was quite incredible.
It's such a simple thing, isn't it, to expect to be able to have clean water? It's something that we don't even contemplate because, of course, we just turn on the tap and our water will not harm us. But I know I was, in fact, just this morning, my mind was going down another rabbit track, and I was looking up the child mortality rates in Cambodia, and they were like 10 times more kids die under 5 than here. I know of one child of all my acquaintances and friends and everyone who has passed away under 5. And yet if we're in Cambodia, we would know, half a dozen or 10 or more. I mean, and that's horrifying. It's just...
It is. It's so preventable.
Yes,
it's
exactly.
It's heartbreakingly, preventable. But you know what? I had maybe 2 minutes to myself that to have those thoughts, because soon enough, a little girl came up to me, took my hand and half skipped, dragged me down the road.
I could go on for hours about the need for clean water sources for people all around the world, because it's so scary to think that there are people who don't have clean water, and that makes a huge, scary difference to life. But anyway, it was really great that we could change this for a few families, and I really liked Aimee's description of her experience of delivering those water filters. Anyway, I need to move on, and my final guest today is someone who I know that Aimee and Meagan won't mind me describing as being someone very special. So they were regular travellers on our trip, but my next guest, Cham, was our tour guide in Cambodia. And I think that all of us loved Cambodia even that bit more because of Cham. It was really interesting for me to hear a guide's perspective for a start. And I guess for him, it was even less about the destination. It was almost not very much about the destination for us because of the nature of what we were doing in Cambodia. But for Cham, it was definitely more about the people, and including the travellers and what we learned and what we taught him, which I guess it's a sign of a very, very good guide. We were very lucky to have Cham, and even luckier that when we moved on to our week in Vietnam, he came with us as a fellow traveller. So it was great to be able to have our Cambodian buddy there and to learn more and more about Cambodia just by chatting with him. So I asked Cham about the highlight of his time guiding us in Cambodia, and he referred to the same village visit near Phnom Penh that Aimee described. And in particular, when we arrived there, my son Reuben had quite an anxious and negative reaction at first. He didn't want to get off the bus. I think it was a combination of being quite a big and busier village than one we'd seen before, and obviously really poor, and he was a bit overwhelmed. And Cham also talks about another fellow traveller, Tom, and what my son and Tom learnt from the experience in Phnom Penh, which is in turn what Cham learnt about people and empowerment tourism.
Something that enlightened me to another level of experience was at the community in Phnom Penh. Mm-hmm. That was where Reuben had problem. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, that was my favorite part. Yes, this is amazing, and because of Reuben. Second one because of Tom as well. Who remember what he said at the Green Palace on the first day? He said he did not know what is the empowering tourism means to him. Mm-hmm. And then the next day we went to the home house, the community that we're going to spend a night over there. that was an eyes opening to him of what empowering concept means. So there's a lot of stubborn people, but at the same time, there's two people, Ruben and Tom. Ruben teach me that even though it's a place that you've never been to before, you don't have to change the things about that place. And the community and the people will change you. Will be the reason for you to open your heart and accept the way they are and make you move forward, even though you are hesitating to do so. So without we, just the one who were feeling so anxiety, but this community and society and the people make us feel so welcome and comfortable for us to move beyond our comfort zone. For Tom, he really stubborn at some point. He don't accept people perspective honestly or like openly, but at the same time, he's not a close-minded person. He's a good listener and open-minded person at the same time. So he tries to understand, to listen, to think, and to always accept advice. So people who like to accept advice and listen to what you talk, it makes the talker more willing to talk more with him and tries to not to change his perspective, to understand what it means to them, to other people. And sooner or later, when they realize what we were saying, he will understand that, oh, this is the meaning of empowering concept. And that was my two favorite part.
You're going to make me cry.
It's really, yeah. So to me, when I see someone who don't really understand it, I'm not feel pity or feel sad. But to me, I was like, what can I do to make him understand it? What can I simplify the word empowering concepts to him so that he understand it? Because I used to be a person like him who thinking too much, tries to put things together, tries to find the real definition of the word, what it's going to be mean. So to him, what he was hearing was just the term empowering tourism or empowering concept without never try it before. But when we bring him to the community talk itself on what it means by empowering tourism. And also he understood, the next day that we're having the temple hopping, the royal palace hopping, Lucas, you guys did not go with us, right?
No, we'll see. Yeah.
Lucas, Tom, and Luana start realizing that Cham. Now we understand what the meaning of traveler is. So we are the traveler, we are not the tourist. So they understand it by themselves at the end of Cambodia tour.
Yeah.
And I never talk these words to them, but I just want them to know that it means so much to me that the trip and the project that we've been involved so far have made you yourself enlightened to another wisdom on yourself. And that's what I wanted from my traveler. And that's amazing. I like you guys to be who you are. And at the same time, I can be who I am, as you can see on the tour.
Yeah. Oh, it was the perfect combination. But I think you're right. It's the showing, not the telling. So you can tell someone all about empowerment tourism and what the projects will do, but the showing and experiencing it is just so much at a completely different level to just reading or hearing, being told about it. So, yeah, I think that's so important. Yeah. Oh, that's a beautiful favorite moment. I love it.
I love it. So I feel like you guys should be here again.
Yeah, I want to be back. But I think it's no coincidence that was Ruben's favorite day of the whole trip as well. So yeah,
I love it.
Yeah. Very special and very different to just going somewhere to see the sights.
You make me sad now.
I know.
Thinking about the past time. It's not like that long ago, right?
No.
It was like, oh my God. But it was like still in me.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Yes.
It's it's a trip that's still in my head every day. More things come into mind.
I cannot shut it down.
Yeah.
It's like keep coming to me.
Yeah, exactly. I've never had quite that experience before, that it's just lingering so much. There's still new things still working through in my brain and keeps coming back. Yeah. But I think that's a sign of a very, very worthwhile trip.
Yeah, it's good to hear.
Yeah, I love it that even for you, who's led many trips, that you can still learn things while you do them.
Yeah. That's why I love doing as a tour leader for the company, because every person I met, every time I spend with, it's always give me a wisdom. Like, I've been asking myself whether I should continue my master degree or PhD. And I feel like the more I met people, the more knowledge I learn. Why should I go for master degree? And at the same time, I was wondering, like, is the certificate is important for me, or is it really major thing that I need? And I was like, why wasting my time when I can do what I love?
I know you'll have often heard me say that I think traveling teaches us so much important stuff about ourselves and about understanding others. And I think Cham's description of what we learned and what he learned from our time in Cambodia is so spot on. And this is why traveling is so important. I really think it's so hard to learn these kinds of lessons about life so kind of intensely by staying home. It happens for sure, but it's so magnified when you travel, and there's so many chances to really have a kind of a deeper think about the world. And there's a post on my blog, which I'll link to in the show notes, which talks about what else my son learnt from our time in Cambodia and in Vietnam. And even though that's now a few weeks ago since I wrote the post, there's still more and more things that I see in him. Like, he is absolutely changed as a result of that trip. And I think that's where travel becomes really powerful. And I wish more people had the chance to do it so that they could have these lessons more intensely and more often. But anyway, let me finish up by saying that my time in Cambodia was incredible and far too short, and I will be back there to experience more as soon as humanly possible. So a huge thank you to Hands on Journeys for having us there, and a very big thank you to Cham for being our awesome host and guest and guide. And let me tell you about the other guests. So first of all, I spoke with Meagan Hurst of Marlas with a Mission. She has a great story behind this, which we'll talk about more in another episode, but do head over to marlaswithamission.com or Marlas with a Mission on Instagram to see what she's doing. It's a really cool idea, and she has awesome products. As promised, there's a link to the Phnom Penh Animal Welfare Society as well. After Meg and I spoke with Aimee, and Aimee's been inspired to start a blog soon. So soon there'll be a link to that. But at the moment, you can find her on Instagram at AimeeJ234. Her Aimee is AIMEE J234 on Instagram. Look her up and connect. And last but very, very far from least, I spoke with Cham, and his full name is much longer than that. It's Po Sok Chamron. And you can find his Facebook page under that name. He has a Facebook page, which is actually at facebook.com/community-based tourism traveler, but it's really under his full name. Go and see what he's doing there. He does all sorts of exciting things to help Cambodia, and to help others in Southeast Asia improve life for everyone, basically. He's a really philosophical guy, and I have some more extracts from my chat with Cham to come in future episodes. I'll also leave a link to the Fiji episode if you want to hear more about what Hands on Journeys are doing. And all of these links will be in the show notes, and the show notes are at notaballerina.com/114. Finally, do come over to our Facebook group. All of these lovely people are in our Facebook group, and we'll chat to you there. So if you've got any questions about our experiences, do come and ask. You can find it under Thoughtful Travellers on Facebook. Just look up Thoughtful Travellers, or there's a link in the show notes as well. Thank you very, very much for listening. This has been another episode of the Thoughtful Travel Podcast. Show notes and other information are at notaballerina.com/podcast. Join me again soon for another chat about why we travel. Bye for now.